Laura says, when using non-Waite-Smith decks, my brain always wants to compare the new deck of cards to the Waite-Smith deck, and I lose my ability to read intuitively. So the question is there any suggestions on how to stop mentally comparing the decks? So here's the Nine of Wands, and the first thing I spot are the thorns and the wounds on her chest. So I'm going to ask myself, what do thorns and the wounds on her chest have to do with the question I've just asked? And I do this outside of whatever the card is. So we know that from a rote perspective, this is the Nine of Wands. So if we focus on the title of the card first, your brain is going to recall the Rider-Waite-Smith imagery first. At least that's my experience. If instead you let your eyes slide past the title of the card and look at something in the image that catches your attention and ask yourself how that could apply to your question. So we can do this in real time by just simply asking a basic question like, what do I need to focus on for the day? Well, I'm going to look at those thorns and those wounds and how close she is sort of cuddling up to this thorn bush or rose bush. And I'm going to maybe say to myself, you know what? Maybe today I need to not cuddle up to the thorns. Maybe today I need to give myself permission to have a little space between myself and the things that aggravate me, that poke at me, or that get under my skin. So now I've got my answer before I have thought about or gone to the title of the card and what I know about that card. So now I can layer that back in if I want to. Now that we know that the Nine of Wands, for example, is a card of sort of holding the line, being protective of what is behind you, and sort of digging in, even though you've taken wounds. There's a sort of stubborn energy to the Nine of Wands that we can lean into and go, okay, that's one way of being, but maybe after so many wounds, we could also like learn our lesson and like back up a bit. Maybe our boundaries need to create some space, right? So that is one way you can do that. And it's helpful when you're working with decks that give you more room from the Rider-Waite-Smith imagery to practice this. Like you saw in the previous example, or like, okay, like look at the Buffy. Now this is very Rider-Waite-Smithish, right? It's not giving me a lot of space between the Rider-Waite-Smith imagery and itself for me to be able to practice this technique very easily. So my suggestion is always to first pick a deck that is not cloning. So it's not so close to the Rider-Waite-Smith imagery that you're going to have a hard time like separating the two. So instead, try to practice this technique with decks that really go their own way. So decks that have a lot more going on visually. So let's try another one, for example. So we have the Chariot. The first thing I noticed is that the Chariot is a snail. So yes, I know what the card is. I did notice the title right away. But we have somebody riding a snail. This is somebody who is purpose-driven, but is not concerned with how quickly she gets there. Now I have an answer to my question for the day. What do I need to focus on today? Staying focused, but not worrying about being quick, right? Let's try another one. I'm going to try to cover up the title as we go. Okay, let's look at this one. So here we have somebody with a watering can on her back and a blooming flower in front of her. What do I need to focus on today? Remembering that I have all the tools that I need in order to nurture what I want to grow. So let's say I'm working on a project. I already have the tools I need to make progress on that project. I don't need to keep reaching for more stuff to help me grow in this area, right? Let's try another one. Oh, I didn't even see what the card is. So we'll go back and look at that one in a second. Okay, here's another one. This character has a birdhouse on their head. They're taking care of others, but the leaves and things poking out from this birdhouse are actually covering their own eyes. So they're taking care of others, but perhaps at their own expense, right? So that could be my message for the day. And we have the Two of Swords. So I might not have gotten there if I'd have went right to the Two of Swords. I would have been thinking about decisions and whatnot. Instead, what I'm realizing, so this is where you give yourself permission to read more intuitively with the artwork. Now, when you can see the title, right? If you're not doing this to yourself, right? If you can see the title, then go to the imagery first. What do you get from that? Okay, I get that she's kind of blinded to things because she's so busy focusing on these birds and taking care of them or listening to them. When we weave the Two of Swords into that, we're like, well, the Two of Swords, that's a card about being stuck in decision-making, right? We're blocked. We're stuck in decision-making. And now it's okay to pull that Rider-Waite-Smith imagery in. And you're like, okay, we're usually blindfolded, so we can't see. So we can see that visually depicted on this card. Why are we having such a hard time making this decision? Because we've got all this chitter-chatter, other people's opinions, other people's ideas. Maybe these two paths are kind of warring for our attention. What we really need to do is shut all that noise out and tune into our heart and make the decision that is right for us. Does that make sense? So that one that we did before with the watering can was the Page of Pentacles, right? So I try really regularly actually to let my eyes slide past titles, and that really, really helps.